when you're a child, presuming that your parents beat you. Not everyone is beaten by their parents, but millions of us are. As soon as the child figures out the look in the parent's eye that means they're going to be beaten, then the look in the eye is more terrifying than the stick or the fist, because you know what that look in their eye means. And first you learn to fear the stick, then you learn to fear the fist, then you learn to fear the look in the person's eye. But then as childhood goes on, and you develop more of awareness of yourself, of your own strength, of your own tenacity, of your own obduracy, of your own will, then you move on and you learn to feel contempt for the threat, the look in the eye, the fist, the stick. Then you learn to appreciate a sense of your own strength, of your own ability to overcome that challenge. The awareness that you can be whipped and you can be beaten, and you're stronger than that. I got a reasonably profound question the last time I was live streaming, and I thought I'd make an effort to give it a reasonably profound answer. It was a question from the audience about the meaning of happiness in my life. And already there's sort of a peculiar puzzle in the fact that it's the word happiness and not the word satisfaction. I think with happiness, we almost have a double meaning. Is happiness something fleeting? Is happiness something durable? Is happiness something shallow? Or is happiness something profound? And if we asked those same questions about satisfaction, I think we'd actually come to very different answers, even though happiness and satisfaction are so closely linked in their meanings in the English language. And this question is really interesting for me to answer at this particular time in my life. Right now I have custody of my daughter legally for just 15 days, flown to the south of France with my girlfriend, whom I'm very much in love with. So I'm here with my girlfriend under the palm trees on the beach in an ostentatiously beautiful part of the world, living a lifestyle that many people might aspire to or associate with maybe the highest happiness possible. This is sort of a land where there are flowers in bloom all around me, birds singing in the trees, and we do indeed get to swim in the azure ocean and these things. Although if it were not for my daughter, I'd be doing none of it, because these are not my priorities in life. This is not what motivates me. I would never go on vacation this way. I would never go on a beach vacation of any kind if it weren't for my daughter or these strange circumstances, So the question of what is happiness and how it shapes the behavior of other human beings around me and how it does and doesn't shape my behavior is something that's been on my mind, along with the overweening questions of duty, honor, obligation. Because obviously my relationship with my daughter is very much in my mind. Day by day, and in looking ahead to the months and years into the future we're trying to plan my education and career for. Many people watching this video will expect me to answer. Many people have been regular viewers of mine, known me for a few years to whatever extent. They're probably expecting an answer that either comes out of Schopenhauer's school of thought, Schopenhauer's school of philosophy, which I do actually have some videos on, or reflecting my background in Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, because I was a scholar of Buddhism for many years. I like to say 10 years for a round number. I don't want to think about how many it was. Especially Theravada Buddhism. I learned to read Pali. I did a lot of original scholarship and lived in Buddhist countries and so on. And you can say, to make a long story short, that both the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer and the philosophy of Buddhism at its core, Theravada Buddhism especially, really do depict happiness as a false god, as something you should not plan your life around, something you should not allow to distort your goals as an intellectual or simply as a man. That's not really the main message or theme I'd want to reflect on here, although I'll come back to it, because there's some sense in which my involvement with Buddhism and my involvement with philosophy of Schopenhauer reflects certain aspects of my character. But the people who are really close to me, the people who know me in life and not just on YouTube, they see me in circumstances where other people would be struggling, where other people would be suffering, where other people would be miserable. And I'm ebullient. Ebullient meaning really happy and smiling and laughing and even singing. My girlfriend and I went through a situation in an airport recently. It was actually Bangkok Airport. We flew via Bangkok Airport coming here to France. And it was a disaster at the airport. It wasted about 3.5 hours of our lives. No, it was a horrible, horrible situation at the airport. And I never stopped smiling. I never stopped laughing. I was really kind of buoyed up by it and joyous in dealing with it. And again, that's a side of my character. You really have to know me. You have to live with me or work with me to see it. You'd never see it on YouTube, or you'd never get that sense from reading my essays, reading my written, or even reading book length works for me. I respond to those kinds of challenges not with phony optimism, not with a contrived cheerfulness. I'm really actually happy in dealing with them. And I do have more extreme examples of that too. I can think of just one situation where somebody was threatening to kill me. It was really a credible threat. Somebody was threatening to murder me. And I was smiling and laughing and happy and so on. If anything, I had to try to behave less happy than I was in dealing with that. Again, it wasn't contrived. I really felt that way. The only philosopher I know to talk about this aspect of my life, and I think it's an aspect of other people's lives in general, is actually the philosopher Max Stirner, who also there's a video on this channel about his philosophy. Max Stirner is the only guy I can remember who talks about the obduracy of children and the sense of oneself that develops when you face up to challenges, when you defy things that maybe at first as a child seemed impossible to defy. Stirner talks about the fact that when you're a child, presuming that your parents beat you, not everyone is beaten by their parents, but millions of us are, as soon as the child figures out the look in the parent's eye that means they're going to be beaten, then the look in the eye is more terrifying than the stick or the fist, because you know what that look in their eye means. And first you learn to fear the stick, then you learn to fear the fist, then you learn to fear the look in the person's eye. But then as childhood goes on, and you develop more of awareness of yourself, of your own strength, of your own tenacity, of your own obduracy, of your own will, then you move on and you learn to feel contempt for the threat, the look in the eye, the fist, the stick. Then you learn to appreciate a sense of your own strength, of your own ability to overcome that challenge. The awareness that you can be whipped and you can be beaten, and you're stronger than that. And even if you weep, that the tears are meaningless and fleeting and so on. I remember Max Stirner talking about the psychology of childhood. He had some reflections on a very peculiar form of happiness that, you might call thriving on misery. But this sense of your own strength, sense of your own obduracy, this sense that you can overcome this challenge that's in front of you, and of being buoyed up by that, of being happy by it. That's an element of my character that certainly came out during this strange situation at the airport. 3.5 hours of misery at the airport, but I was not miserable. And my girlfriend was really asking me, how should she behave? She said, look, she said, do you want me to pretend to be happy? And I said, no, don't pretend. I'm not pretending. I said, for me, I have a liberating feeling of doing the best I can. And doing the best you can means different things to different people. But as long as I am doing the best I can, I know I can't do anything better than this. So I don't suffer at all. I'm not staying there in the airport worried, like, oh, am I going to miss my flight and it's going to be all my fault. I'm doing everything I can. And then beyond that, I have that peculiar low-level joy described by Max Stirner, of knowing that I don't fear the fist, and I don't fear the rod, and I don't fear the look in the other person's eye that brings those threats with them or what have you. I enjoy the feeling of my own capacity to cope, if you like. And that is a durable form of happiness that I have with me always, and that I've experienced in a lot of really extreme situations, including, threats of violence and people threatening to kill me, or threats that have to do with my livelihood or, impacting my life in some really significant way otherwise. And I guess for people who don't feel it, it's difficult to describe. And I guess for people who don't understand it, looking in from the outside, they might perceive me as reckless. But actually what I'm doing is not reckless at all. It's perfectly self-controlled. And I would say further, I only feel that way in situations where the nature of the crisis is not my fault. So I don't feel guilty for anything that's going wrong at the airport. None of it's my fault and so on. It would be much, much different, obviously, if I was in a situation where I was taking care of my daughter and there was a problem that was my fault. Then you'd have feelings of guilt and responsibility. And I'd be aware of my own daughter's inability to cope, which is very different from that sense of joy in my own ability to cope. So that is one sense, the ability to thrive on misery, the ability to overcome obstacles and have a feeling of one's own obduracy, and being aware of one's own fearlessness in dealing with problems that used to cause fear, even if they weren't things you would have feared in childhood, or maybe things you would have feared when you were younger and more inexperienced as a teenager in your early 20s, whatever the case may be. You can think of your own examples here. But there is still some sense in which I do identify with the critique of happiness presented by Arthur Schopenhauer, presented by Theravada Buddhism. I find myself walking the streets here of the Côte d'Azur, this beautiful part of France, and yes, the idea that somebody would be captivated by the sight of a yacht, of an expensive boat, and think that they want that to be happy. We're passed on the street by very expensive cars, Ferraris and Porsches and what have you, that somebody would see that and desire that and would take that on as a goal. The idea that someone, or like myself, might come here and then go back to Canada and feel motivated that they have to save up money so that one day they can be the person in the yacht or they can be the person in the fancy car with an apartment here in the south of France at the beach. That is contemptible to me in a sense that's shallow and profound at the same time. But I can't even say it's something I believe or something that I've chosen. I really think that's an aesthetic difference between myself and other people more than it even is a moral difference or a choice. None of those things. I'm not drawn to any of those things. I never have been, and I think I never could be. When I first enrolled in the University of Toronto, my major was economics. And when people asked me why, I answered because I wanted to study the philosophy of poverty. I've always been drawn to poverty. I've always been drawn to the devastation of war, the post-war struggle, the struggle to reconstruct a society after disaster, war, famine. I've always been concerned about genocide, including the slow-motion genocide against Canada's own people, questions of endangered languages enduring, and the injustices of the British Empire in creating Canada, the country I was born into, and so on. But we can talk about those things philosophically. We can talk about them politically. But I can also just say there's a level on which it's aesthetic. And the truth is, my parents brought me to France when I was a child. They brought me to Italy and a few other parts of Europe. I saw all this splendor, and to me there was nothing splendid in it. And I was never interested in having a life lived in pursuit of those creature comforts. I wanted a life that was full of suffering and defined by suffering, but where it was meaningful suffering. I wanted to live a meaningful life as I defined it. And I did that. I can tell you honestly, if I die tomorrow or if I died yesterday, I did live a meaningful life already by my own definition. And now I'm moving on to a very new and different chapter of my life. I say this, the floor is covered with toys for my daughter. We spent, 8 hours today with my daughter going to the beach and sitting on this floor playing with these toys. We played some video games too and so on. It's taken on a new dimension and a new direction. But no, my life has never been about happiness. And that's both the short and the long answer to that question.